Hey guys, I'm Jim. I edit photos. Thank you for stopping by. Today I'm in On1 Photo Raw 2021. I'm playing around with a photo that I took years ago. It's a night shot from Bratislava, Slovakia. Beautiful little town, super cool. And one of the things I've been trying to do in On1 as I continue to kind of refine my workflow is figure out how I want to edit night shots. I've done a previous video about it, and this is another video about editing night shots, and that's because I love shooting at night. And I do that more and more now than I ever did before. And I love shooting in cities. And so these city shots at night, they tend to have kind of an orangey yellow kind of look to them. Let me just show you the photo. Here it is. You can kind of see this is from the top of what's called their UFO restaurant. Sits on top of this bridge, looks over this church. I forget what it's called because this was, oh God, 8 or 9 years ago. But anyway, long exposure, picks up all those yellowy orange lights, and I just don't like it. So I've been working through using all the different powerful, amazing tools that are in On1 and trying to get it to where, I really like what I got. So that's what I'm doing in this video. And first I'm starting by cropping. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that right out of the gate because this is not the kind of photo that's not really the shape that I want. There's a lot of dead space. I was shooting vertically to capture all that stuff. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply and move on. So I'm going to walk through and share some of the ideas, the tips, the tricks, the things I'm doing to really get the photos looking the way I want them to look. So I'm here on the Develop tab now, and I'm going to start with here in kind of the tone section. First thing up is a little bit of contrast. I tend to do that and pull down highlights just a tiny bit as well. And then temperature and tint, this is where you make frankly, kind of a big move. And that's because it is so orangey yellow that you really got to drag the temperature quite a bit to the left. So I'm going into like the 2600 kind of range. So maybe something about like that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of tint. It was negative 10 or so. And taking that positive and taking the temperature so far to the left made a huge difference, as you can see. And that's one way to go about doing that. Now, it causes some blue to show up in some other areas, like on the chapel. We're going to fix that here in a minute. I'm also going to bump up the saturation a little bit, simply because I do like my saturation, and I want to get my vibrance increased as well. So there you go. Already, I think we've made a huge impact on the photo. There it is beforehand, not including the crop and the lens correction, and there it is now. So looking a lot better, but I got a lot I want to do to this photo. So I'm going to start by going into the Effects tab and getting Color Enhancer. And the first thing I'm going to do is just grab that blue and bring the saturation level down. And I'm bringing that down globally by about a negative 35, 36, 38, something like that. All that's doing, if I turn this off, is just reducing the intensity of the blue. You can kind of see that in the chapel. And there it is after I've done that. Also, some of the stuff reflected in the river, that sort of thing, some of the lights on the buildings, I'm just pulling down that blue. It doesn't get rid of it, but it reduces the intensity of it, which I kind of like. And now the next thing I want to do is add Hdr Look, and that's because I'm wanting to just kind of pop some of the details in the building and the street and that sort of thing. So I'm going to add clarity of about a 30 or so. And I'm going with the default here of the compression and detail. Now let me turn this off. So there it is beforehand, and there it is with the Hdr Look applied. I'm applying that globally. You have amazing masking tools if you want to customize the look of it, but usually what I worry about when I add Hdr Look is this going to grain up the sky or just cause a whole lot of blah in places I don't want it? Because it's a night shot and it's frankly really dark outside of the core center of the photo, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to let it apply globally. So one more time, there it is before, and there it is after. But if you look at the street, I mean, that's just, to me, that just looks super cool. I love those light trails anyway, and now they're getting a bit crispier. I'm digging that. This building over here on the right looks pretty awesome as well. So I'm pretty happy. I'm going to keep going, but I want to do some adjustments here to tone. So Tone Enhancer is a great tool for that. The first thing I'm going to do is pull down the highlights, and this is like a negative 55 or so. And I'm actually going to pull up the whites of about a 20, 22, something about like that. And I'm actually going to pull up detail as well, about 45 or 46. Now, that's looking a little intense, but what I'm going to do is get into the masking tools, and I'm going to invert so that it's not in the photo. Remember, black conceals, white reveals. So it's currently black, which means that detail and the highlights and whites that I adjusted in Tone Enhancer aren't showing anywhere. But I'm going to get into paint in mode so I can paint it in, and I'm going to use the perfect brush. Maybe you saw that video about the perfect brush. It's pretty fantastic. I'm a big fan. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and this edit that I've just done is really designed around this chapel. So I'm just going to paint it into the chapel here and let the magic brush or perfect brush kind of do its magic. So there we go. If you take a look at the view, you can kind of see where I've been painting this in. And I might come back with paint out and clean that up a tiny bit around these edges here. But basically, I was mostly just trying to get, let me click view again, a little bit of that enhancement to occur on the chapel. So as you recall, I took down highlights, bumped up whites. That was trying to create more white there in the chapel. So let me turn this off. If you look at the before, there it is, a little less crispy, a little less white and that sort of thing. And if you look at the after, it's a little bit more white. It's just a minor move, but I wanted to do that, and the perfect brush was perfect for letting me mask that in. Now I'm going to go get another tool, and this one is dynamic contrast, and this one is really just fantastic for kind of popping some of those details. So I'm going to take medium up to about 30, and I'm going to take large up to like mid 40s, 45, 46, something like that. And again, that's applying across the entire photo. I don't want to do that. So once again, I'm going to get the perfect brush, which is, if you can't tell, kind of my favorite thing. Perfect brush is highlighted there. I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of that. And all I'm going to do is start painting that in to some of these areas here in the foreground, which are the streets and the building. And I want to get this highway as well. What I don't want is all that extra dynamic contrast, which really pops the details. I don't want it showing up in the water or the sky or anything like that. So once again, I'll click on view. That looks pretty good. I'm going to clean it up in a couple of areas, like right there and maybe a little bit over here as well. Let me go back to paint in mode, and I'm going to get a little bit more over here on the highway. I like kind of going back and forth, and maybe a little bit more on the church. I tend to go back and forth between the different view modes, either turning on or turning off that view mode here in the masking tool. It's great to get that visual representation in black and white, and then it's also, of course, great to turn view off and just get back to looking at the photo, because that's really what you care about. So having done that, one more time, I've masked this dynamic contrast into those areas, which is really just kind of popping a little bit more crunch there, which I like quite a bit. So I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to actually go get dynamic contrast one more time. This time, however, I'm going to go negative. So I'm going to go about a negative 75 on small, about a negative 70 on medium, and large is like a negative 50 something, something about like that. All I'm doing is just the opposite of what I did last time. Not in the exact opposite areas, but the opposite kind of move, which is I'm softening up. So I'm removing dynamic contrast. And once again, I'm going to just click invert, and I'm going to be in paint in mode, as you can see, and I'm in the magic brush, and I'm just going to go paint this in. Oops, not that big of a brush. So maybe something like that. I just want to paint it into the areas where I don't really care about there being a whole lot of dynamic contrast. I just want to soften it up, and in particular, I want to come down here and really soften up that water, because it was a longer exposure of a few seconds. I don't remember offhand. I would have to look, which I can do right here. This was 20 seconds. So you can see it's a little bit of a longer exposure, but what I want to do is just accentuate that. So once again, I'm just going to go into view mode and do a little comparison and just kind of mask over some of these areas in order to get some of that smoothing in the areas that I want it to be. So I'm going to go up here, touch this up a little bit. I think that's fine. I'm going to go back to turning off view mode. And if I turn off this filter, dynamic contrast, you can see there's a little bit more detail in the water, and the sky is really dark enough that you can't tell, but I smoothed it anyway. But now that I turn this back on, you can see that that water softened up a little bit, which I think looks great. And that's one thing I've been doing in order to soften up components of a photo in On1 is just go negative dynamic contrast, and then of course just paint it in using the perfect brush. Okay, another adjustment here. This time I'm going to get color adjustment. I'm going to grab the blue, and I'm going to take it down in saturation about a negative 20, something like that. And in this case, once again, I'm just going to paint it into the church with the perfect brush. So this is just an additional blue reduction, simply because I feel like there's a little too much blue in the church, but I like it everywhere else. So I'm just kind of trying to be very specific and customize the look of that church a little bit. If you click on view, that's close enough. I think that looks just fine. So I'm done with that one. And now I just have one more tool and I'm finished with this entire edit, and that is a vignette. So I'm gonna pull the brightness down to about a -45, something about like that. Size is gonna increase a little bit to about a 60, and I'm going roundness of about, maybe 25 or something like that. So not a heavy vignette, just a little bit around the edges. So if I turn this off, there it is before, and then you turn it back on, there it is after. Really not a whole lot. There's already a kind of a natural vignette on the photo, to be honest, simply because the center of the photo is really bright. You've got the leading line of the highway with the light trails kind of leading you to the church, and that whole section is bright, plus as the road intersects and the cars go the opposite ways, all that's pretty bright. So a little bit of a natural vignette anyway, but I wanted to add just a little bit more just in case. So that's my full edit here. Let me click on preview and show you what we started with. That's what the photo started like, my friends. Very yellow, very soft, for lack of a better word. No detail in the church, no detail in the roads. It was just kind of a 20-second exposure that ended up with a yellow blob. And frankly, I just wanted to do something with it, and I turned it into that. I think that looks fantastic. I'm a little bit biased because it's my edit, my photo, but if I do the sliding window here to do a comparison, you can see, we had a massive, massive difference. The church looks vastly different. It's a lot sharper. Over here on this right-hand side, this building just looks crisp and beautiful, and that's because of HDR Look and also dynamic contrast. And this highway, I am just digging that. I love the colors here. I love that white, if you look there beforehand, the left-hand lane, which is the oncoming headlights, are almost kind of yellow. And now they're much crisper kind of white, almost a tiny bit of blue, and they stick out against that background really well. And I just love that. I think overall the color balance in the photo just looks great, and I'm quite happy with the edit. This was really just, again, another example of how you can use the different tools and the masking capabilities in On1 to be very specific and targeted with your edits, and really get something that's honestly, in many ways, was kind of a shot that I was like, I had to edit it. With other products over the years, because I took this 8 or 9 years ago, and I've edited this photo countless different ways, but I really like this edit best. There it is, the original, and there it is now. Really, I think just completely overhauled the photo. Wasn't hard. Masking is powerful. The filters are great. That's how I did it in On1. Hope it gives you some ideas for any night shots you may be working on, and I'll be back more with additional tutorials around On1. If there's anything specific you're looking for, let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you soon, my friends. Hope you're having fun out there. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, have fun editing. I'll see you in the next video, and adios.